Welcome to the Creek Road Baptist Pulpit. These weekly podcasts feature expository messages delivered to edify the soul. Now let's join Pastor Dave as he presents this week's message. Matthew chapter 1 is, we have here at the beginning, I'm going to be reading verse 1. We have the list of the genealogy of Christ. It goes past verse 10. It actually goes all the way down to verse 16 with the genealogy. We have all these names, and several years ago I did a series at Advent time about some of the names in the list who were great men of God. And you look through this list and you can, you've got a whole wheelbarrow full of great heroes of the faith. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah, David, Boaz, Solomon, Urias, Uzziah, Jehoshaphat, Hezekiah. There's just a whole great list of men, Zerubbabel, who did great things. And their faith was outstanding. And we could go on for months talking about all the men and the women of faith who are listed in the genealogy of Christ. It's really a kind of cool thing. But I was going back through the genealogy of Christ in Matthew's gospel, and I was thinking, well, you know what we ought to do, just to be fair, is to look at maybe some of the rascals that were in this list. And I don't know if I'm going to do a series on the rascals in the genealogy, but I at least wanted to take today the worst one, the black sheep of the family, and talk about him today. And so I'm going to revisit this list and look at this infamous individual and see what happened to him and why we would still want him to be in the genealogy of Christ. The book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begat Isaac, Isaac begat Jacob. Jacob begat Judas and his brethren. And Judas begat Phares, and Zerah of Tamar. And Phares begat Esrom, and Esrom begat Aram. And Aram begat Abinadab, and Abinadab begat Nason, and Nason begat Salmon. And Salmon begat Boaz of Rahab, and Boaz begat Obed of Ruth, and Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David the king, and David the king begat Solomon of her that had been the wife of Urias. And Solomon begat Rehoboam, and Rehoboam begat Abiah, and Abiah begat Asa, and Asa begat Jehoshaphat, and Jehoshaphat began Joram, and Joram begat Uzziah, and Uzziah begat Jotham, and Jotham begat Ahaz, and Ahaz begat Hezekiah, and Hezekiah begat Manasseh, and Manasseh begat Ammon, and Ammon begat Josiah. So today I want to look at the black sheep in the family. Here in verse 10, Manasseh. Manasseh is probably the worst of the worst. Manasseh is that fellow who you never like to see him come, but you love to see him go. Do you have anybody like that in your family? You know, an Uncle Roy who is maybe a great uncle or something, and he lives a very corrupt life and has very corrupt language and manners, and he's just not a nice guy, and his language is foul, and his behavior is foul, and he's family, so you know you can't ignore him, but you don't want to be with him. Manasseh's one of those guys, except Manasseh is the worst. He's worse than any Uncle Roy in this room that you know, okay? He is bad. And so we're going to look at his story today. And if you have your Bible there in your lap, turn back with me to 2 Chronicles chapter 33. We're going to look at Manasseh, the black sheep of the family, and just kind of discover why this fellow Manasseh is important in the genealogy of Christ. Besides being in the line of David, why else would we want him to be there? So 2 Chronicles chapter 33, and we'll begin our reading in verse 1. 2 Chronicles 33 is where we'll find the story of Manasseh. You'll also find it over in, I think it's in 2 Kings 20 or 21. You'll find the story of Manasseh there as well. Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem, but did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, like unto the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel. For he built again the high places, which Hezekiah his father had broken down, and he reared up altars for Baalim, and made groves and worshipped all the hosts of heaven, and served them. He also built altars in the house of the Lord, whereof the Lord had said, In Jerusalem shall my name be forever. And he built altars for all the hosts of heaven, and in 2 courts of the house of the Lord. And he caused his children to pass through the fire in the valley of the son of Hinnom. He also observed times, and used enchantments, and used witchcraft, and dealt with a familiar spirit, and with wizards. He wrought much evil in the sight of the Lord, to provoke him to anger. And he set a carved image, the idol which he had made, in the house of God, which God had said to David and to Solomon, his son, In this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen before all the tribes of Israel, will I put my name forever. Neither will I any more remove the foot of Israel from out of the land which I have appointed for your fathers, so they will take heed to do all that I have commanded them, according to the whole law and the statutes and the ordinances by the hand of Moses. So Manasseh made Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem to err and to do worse than the heathen whom the Lord had destroyed before the children of Israel. And the Lord spake to Manasseh and to his people, but they would not hearken. Wherefore the Lord brought upon them the captains of the host of the king of Assyria, which took Manasseh among the thorns, and bound him with fetters, and carried him to Babylon. And when he was in affliction, he besought the Lord his God, and humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers, and prayed unto him, and he was entreated of him, and heard his supplication, and brought him again to Jerusalem to his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that the Lord, he was God. Now after this he built a wall without the city of David, on the west side of Gihon, in the valley, even to the entering at the fish gate, and compassed about Ophel, and raised it up a very great height, and put captains of war in all the fenced cities of Judah. And he took away the strange gods and the idol out of the house of the Lord, and all the altars that he had built in the mount of the house of the Lord, and in Jerusalem, and cast them out of the city. And he repaired the altar of the Lord, and sacrificed thereon peace offerings and thank offerings, and commanded Judah to serve the Lord God of Israel. So this is the story of Manasseh. He is your black sheep of the family. As we look at that list in Matthew, we wonder to ourselves maybe why he's there. But there's something wonderful in this story, and it speaks to the child Jesus and his story as well. So we began in chapter 33 of 2 Chronicles in verse 1, and it said that Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign. 12 years old, and he reigned for 55 years. This is the longest reign of any of the kings of Judah. But it wasn't always a good time. Notice verse 2. He did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. And notice that the chronicler, the only way that he could express how bad this was to say it was worse than those people that God had expelled from the land. You remember the Amorites and the Ammonites that lived in the land? They were bad, and God ejected them from the land when Israel came in. Well, it says of Manasseh, that's how bad he was. He was so bad that he was just like the heathen that were there before, that the Lord had cast out from before the children of Israel. Now, just by way of comparison, in 2 Kings, at the end of 2 Kings, it says that God judged Judah and sent them to Babylon because of Manasseh's sins. So Manasseh is the one who lights the fire and really burns the place down. But something wonderful happens, even though he sinned so horribly before the Lord. Look at verse 2 there. Verse 3. He built again the high places which Hezekiah his father had broken down. Hezekiah was a good king, and there was great revival in Hezekiah's time. As a matter of fact, if you want to go back and look in chapters 30 and 31, you'll see that Hezekiah and the people under his reign went throughout all of Judah, and actually throughout all of Ephraim and Manasseh as well. And they tore down all the pagan altars that there were, completely destroyed them. And they had this wonderful revival centered around Passover time. And there was this great coming back to the Lord, so that everybody was coming out to the temple and worshiping the Lord. So there was a revival of heart that happened. What did Manasseh do as soon as he was in power? He went back out and rebuilt all those altars. So exactly what his daddy had done, he reversed. That's how radical his devotion was. And Manasseh was not raised in a bad home. Manasseh was raised under the tutelage of his dad, Hezekiah. And it says in lots of the places where Hezekiah's revival takes place that it was Hezekiah and the princes. That means Manasseh was right there when all the revival was going on. He heard what happened. He saw what happened. He saw the hand of the Lord happening during the reign of his dad. And yet, as soon as he has a chance, he does exactly the opposite to his father. He built again the high places. Notice the next thing it says. He reared up altars for Balaam. So it wasn't just enough that he restored all that his father had destroyed. Now he's creating new. And notice in verse 3 and in verse 4 and in verse 5, he's building altars. Verse 4, he built altars in the house of the Lord, whereof the Lord had said, in Jerusalem shall my name be forever. And he built altars for the host of heaven, all the hosts of heaven, in the two courts of the house of the Lord. So not only did he build altars to Balaam and to the hosts of heaven, but he put those altars in the Lord's house. And notice it says in verse 3 there, he reared up altars for Balaam and made groves and worshipped all the hosts of heaven and served them. He's not serving the Lord. He's not showing up to worship the Lord. He's got other gods to worship. He's got so many gods, he doesn't know who to choose. He's got Balaam, and he's got Ashtaroth in the grove, and he's got all the hosts. Now, when it says the hosts of heaven, it's talking about the stars in the skies. Okay? Those are the hosts. And when you look up and you see the constellations, people used to worship those as gods. And all the movement of the cosmic gathering in the skies, all the ways that they move, the different positions they find themselves in, all of that was worshipped. And he built altars to sacrifice to those gods whose signs were in the heavens. That's how radical his devotion was. But notice, this is how deep his worship was. Verse 6, he caused his children to pass through the fire in the valley of the son of Hinnom. Child sacrifice was a part of his worship. Isn't that wonderful? What a dark, wicked heart this man had, to kill his own children in worship. It says there in verse 6, he observed times. Well, that goes right hand in hand with worshiping all the hosts of heaven. Because you know what you do when you worship the hosts of heaven? You look for the signs and the times that it speaks of. And today we still do the same thing. We look at the astrology, right? It's astrology. All the horoscope. And you look at, is it time now to do something? Where are the stars? Because once the star's in a certain place, or the moon's in a certain place, or the sun's doing a certain thing, or how it's setting, or what phase this is in or that is in, where is Venus, where is Mars, then you know the time, and you're worshiping all the hosts of heaven, and when the hosts of heaven tell you what time it is, then guess what you're going to do if you're serving them? You're going to do what they say. You see, that's what we're doing here. That's what Manasseh is doing here. He's observing the times. So be very careful about that. Be very careful. The only place that stargazing has in the life of a Christian is to look up and say, look at the marvelous hand of God. You do not look to the stars to tell you what time to do something. Okay? Don't do that. Look to the heavens and say, there is the glory of God displayed. Because Manasseh, he not only worshiped them, he not only built altars to them, but he observed the times that they pointed out to him. Not only that, but he used enchantments, he used witchcraft, he dealt with this familiar spirit, which is a demon, and with wizards. So he was surrounded by people who had demons. So you see how dark and deep and dank and damp this man's, his life is, his heart is completely away from the Lord. He's gone into everything from